You ever have that feeling something's off, but you can't explain it? That little itch in the back of your brain? That's what it felt like for me the night I opened Elena's laptop. My name's Ivan Merrow. I'm 42. I live in downtown Chicago, in a penthouse that's as cold as it is expensive. The kind of place that's supposed to make you feel like you've made it. But lately, it feels more like a museum of our failures. Marble floors, glass walls, no warmth. Elena was out at another conference. She's a political fundraiser, charming, persuasive, the kind of woman who makes people write checks with extra zeros just for the pleasure of being in her orbit. That charisma is part of what drew me to her 10 years ago. That, and her ambition. Back then, it felt like we were a power couple. Now, it feels like I'm just background noise in her highlight reel. I'm a forensic accountant by trade. Used to catch white-collar criminals for a Big Four firm. Now I consult on cybersecurity for high-profile clients, mostly politicians and Fortune 500s who want to know who's robbing them blind before the feds do. It's ironic, because last Thursday night, sitting in our gleaming kitchen under cold LED lights, I realized I had one of those clients living right under my roof. It started with a two-factor auth ping to my phone from an old joint investment account, one I hadn't touched in years. I brushed it off. Could have been a glitch, but something told me to look closer. I pulled her tablet from the charger, used the mirror to catch the angle on her swipe pattern, and got in. At first, I was just browsing. Her schedule, her emails, nothing unusual. Then I found a folder hidden under layers of innocuous-looking business documents. It was labeled simply Mitch. I wish I could say I was shocked, but I wasn't. I'd seen the signs. The late-night calls. The sudden strategy retreats. The way she started wearing perfume again to work. Mitchell Kane, her campaign strategist. Younger, smug, the kind of guy who smiles like he already knows he's better than you. I'd met him twice. Both times he called me man instead of Ivan. That should have been my first clue. Inside the folder were bank statements, transfers from Elena's PACs to what looked like shell accounts, and then to a private joint account in the Caymans. Not mine. Not hers. Theirs. Then there were the emails. Dozens of them. Not just love notes, though there were plenty, but plans. Drafts of a complaint to the FEC. Detailed steps about creating fake login logs for me. Forged emails implying I'd rerouted donations into personal accounts. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a full-on setup. My hand shook as I scrolled. Not from sadness. From rage. From betrayal so deep it felt surgical. And then I saw the part that broke me, a message from Elena to Mitchell. Once the audit flags him, we push for full custody. He won't even see it coming. That night, I didn't sleep. I backed up everything. I mirrored her devices. I encrypted the files and uploaded them to 2 separate offshore servers. They wanted a war? Good. Because I don't lose those. I met Elena in 2014 at a tech gala downtown. One of those networking events where everyone wears name tags and pretends to enjoy tiny hors d'oeuvres. I'd been dragged there by a colleague who insisted I needed to get out more. I wasn't looking to meet anyone. And then she walked in like she owned the room. Red blazer, champagne in hand. Smile like she already knew your secrets. There was this mock debate happening on stage about ethics and innovation, sponsored by some firm trying to sell a blockchain voting system. It was supposed to be lighthearted, but the moderator picked volunteers from the crowd. Elena raised her hand before they finished the sentence. When she got on stage, she tore the panel apart. Smart, sharp, funny as hell. I didn't even remember what I said when they handed me the mic. I just remember her smirking at me like I'd already lost. Afterward, she found me by the bar. "You're not nearly as boring as you looked," she said, sipping her drink. "Still, maybe leave the public speaking to the professionals." I laughed. I think that was the moment I started falling. We moved fast. Dinners, weekends together, talking late into the night about the future, hers, mostly. She had this fire. Said politics was a mess and she planned to make it worse, in the right ways, of course. We got married a year later in a courthouse ceremony. No big party. Just us, a witness, and promises that felt solid. Our twin daughters, Naomi and Lila, came 2 years after that. Everything changed. She started her fundraiser firm, and suddenly we had interns in the living room, donors calling during dinner, photo shoots scheduled on school days. I told myself it was temporary. A growing business. A mission. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being part of the plan. I get home from meetings with high-level clients, companies on the brink of collapse from internal fraud, and she wouldn't even look up from her phone. The girls would ask where mom was, and I'd lie. "She's working late," I'd say, even when I knew she was in a hotel downtown hosting another event. I became a ghost in our own house. And every time I tried to talk to her, she'd brush me off. Not now, Ivan. I'm building something real. Funny. I thought we already had. 2 weeks after I uncovered the emails, I found the real weapon they were planning to use against me. It started with a flagged alert from one of the watchdog sites I set up to monitor financial compliance documents. A new filing had appeared under my name, confidential, but accessible if you knew where to look. The complaint was filed with the Federal Election Commission, accusing me of embezzling campaign funds from Elena's PACs. Not just vague suspicion either. There were transaction logs, fake email threads, even forged login histories tied to IP addresses I'd never used. The detail was impressive. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed it myself. The complaint claimed I'd rerouted nearly $200,000 to offshore accounts during a brief window of unauthorized access. The timeline was so specific it made my blood run cold. They'd faked months of data, built an entire forensic profile designed to match my real work patterns, even copied my phrasing in the emails, down to the M-dashes and Oxford commas. These weren't amateurs. This was a takedown engineered by someone who knew how I worked. Mitchell Kane again. His fingerprints were all over it. He used to work in finance before he pivoted to political strategy. That's what made him useful to Elena. He wasn't just a pretty face with a slick pitch. He knew how to navigate loopholes, bury connections, make bad things look like minor clerical errors. I should have paid more attention when I first shook his hand. He smiled like a man who'd already sold you something you didn't know you needed. The FEC complaint was just the beginning. That same week, I was served with papers, a petition for full custody of Naomi and Lila. Filed by Elena's attorneys, of course. The grounds? My supposed history of emotional volatility stemming from the death of my younger brother, Danny, in a crypto collapse 5 years ago. She painted me as unfit, a man haunted by past trauma, prone to isolation, incapable of parenting under pressure. The court documents were laced with half-truths. My time off after Danny's death labeled as unexplained sabbaticals, therapy notes twisted into accusations of mental instability. She even included a line about how I'd once refused to take the girls to school after a depressive episode. I remember that day. I'd been up all night with food poisoning. But facts didn't matter here. Narrative did. That night, I waited until she fell asleep. Then I took her tablet again. This time, I wasn't just looking for hints. I needed ammunition. I found the encrypted vault buried under decoy folders with titles like Q3 planning and campaign photos. I cracked it using a password I knew she reused, our old honeymoon flight number, backwards. Inside were drafts of strategy memos, legal correspondence with Mitchell, and audio recordings. One caught me off guard. Elena laughing over dinner with Mitchell. Ivan still thinks I'm trying to rebuild this marriage, she said, clinking her wine glass. That's the best part. He's making this so easy. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just copied every file onto a drive, then uploaded it all to a secure cloud vault with rotating access tokens. She thought she'd won, that she'd cut me out cleanly and kept her hands spotless. But the one mistake they made was thinking I wouldn't fight back. I wasn't planning to survive this. I was planning to burn everything they built. I started digging into Judge Raymond Whitlock the next morning. Elena's father always carried himself like a war hero of the bench, stoic, polished, untouchable. He'd presided over high-profile corruption cases and lectured on ethics at Northwestern. When we first started dating, she used to talk about him like he was the moral compass of Chicago, the kind of man who could stare down a crooked mayor and make them blink. But I'd seen his kind before. Judges who spoke in Latin but ruled in favors. Men who understood that justice, when carefully brokered, could make careers. I pulled records from archived court dockets, narrowing in on cases he'd ruled on between 2006 and 2010, years Elena would have still been in college, when her political network first started to take shape. That's when I found it. People vs. Donovan Ridgway, 2009. Buried in a forgotten digital file in Cook County's criminal archive. On paper, it was a minor campaign finance case, unreported donations tied to an education reform PAC. But the moment I read the witness list, I felt the hook dig in. A key witness had disappeared the day before trial. Ridgway's charges were reduced to a misdemeanor and sealed. Judge Whitlock closed the case personally, citing insufficient testimony. The girl who vanished was 23 years old. Her name was Camille Sloan, and she was the daughter of Leonard Feynman, a real estate mogul known for dropping money across both parties in the city like breadcrumbs. A month after the case was closed, Feynman made a sizable donation to a newly minted political committee, Elena's first fundraising platform. Quiet, small, overlooked. I dug deeper. I found a scanned PDF of a fax. Yes, a fax of a last-minute motion Whitlock had submitted himself, bypassing the clerk's signature chain. I traced the donation trail forward through 3 dummy shell entities until I saw Feynman's name again, this time as the principal donor for Whitlock's judicial retirement dinner. They weren't just connected. They were protecting each other. It got worse. Old photos surfaced through a private investigator I paid in cash. Elena, 19, smiling, standing next to Camille Sloan at a youth civic fundraiser. And behind them, Feynman, hand on both girls' shoulders, looking like the benevolent mentor. I felt sick, but I also felt something else, leverage. I compiled everything. Court records, campaign finance reports, archived news clippings, even photos of Feynman's luxury condo building where Elena's early staff worked rent-free. I stored them in a secure, offshore encrypted vault with 3 access keys. One for me, one for my lawyer, and one set to auto-release to 2 political journalists if I didn't log in every 72 hours. The cloud server ran through a server farm in Iceland. Non-extradition territory. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. They wanted to destroy me using the law. Fine. I would return the favor, with a history lesson the public would never forget. I sat back in my office chair, watching the final upload hit 100%. My daughters were asleep down the hall. Elena was in a hotel suite downtown with Mitchell, probably planning their next move. They didn't know what I had now. Her father wasn't just a man with a gavel. He was a man with a trail, one I planned to drag into daylight, brick by brick, until their entire house of lies collapsed. And when it did, they wouldn't just lose a custody case. They'd lose everything. Franklin Ryder looked exactly how I expected, polished, rehearsed, and soulless. We met in his downtown office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, a quiet flex of power and money. He wore a dark blue suit with a silver tie clip that probably cost more than my first car. Elena wasn't there, too smart for that. She knew I wouldn't take the bait if she was across the table. "Ivan," Ryder said, gesturing for me to sit. "This doesn't have to be ugly." I slid into the chair. "Then why'd you bring a settlement package designed to gut me?" He gave me a slow, patronizing smile. "It's standard in cases like this. Given the complaint to the FEC and the custody concerns. I'm not here for a lecture." He opened his folder, spreading out papers like a magician prepping his final trick. "Elena's willing to be generous, considering the circumstances. You'll forfeit any claim to shared assets, the penthouse, and all investment properties. In return, we avoid criminal proceedings, and you'll have supervised visitation with the girls." I didn't blink. "You done?" He hesitated. "You understand what's on the table, right?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim black envelope. Handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked. I leaned back in my chair. "It says press only if provoked. I suggest you remember that." He opened it halfway, scanned the first couple lines, then froze. His mouth twitched. For the first time, the smug disappeared. "You leaked this?" he asked quietly. "No. But if I disappear, get disbarred, or lose access to my daughters based on fraudulent claims, several newsrooms will be very interested in what's inside." I stood. I know Elena's style. She doesn't fight fair. Neither do I. Later that night, I started the next phase of my plan. Anonymous tips. One went to a local reporter with a reputation for exposing shady campaign finances. Another to a watchdog group tracking dark money in PACs. I didn't give them everything, just enough to raise eyebrows. A few names. A few shell company trails. Hints about Judge Whitlock's retirement fund. By the end of the week, whispers started surfacing online. Reddit threads. A suspicious tweet from a junior staffer about untraceable donations. A blog post titled "The Queenmaker and the Family Court Favoritism Machine." Elena's team thought they could bury me in paperwork, isolate me, break me down quietly. They didn't realize I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was baiting them into overplaying their hand. And with every leak, every press mention, the walls around their perfect little empire started to crack. It started with a whisper, then it turned into a storm. The first investigative article dropped on a Tuesday morning. A mid-tier political blog with a decent following posted a piece titled, "Family Values or Family Fraud? A Closer Look at the Whitlock Machine." It named no names outright, But the implications were obvious. A retiring judge linked to sealed court records. A young fundraiser whose early career was financed by unusual donors. Campaign funds rerouted through dummy LLCs. Elena's face wasn't in the article, but the photo of her standing next to Judge Whitlock at a gala 10 years ago didn't leave much to the imagination. By Wednesday, the Chicago Tribune picked it up. Federal Election Commission opens inquiry into local political PACs, the headline read. Mitchell Kane's name appeared in bold, tied to 2 offshore accounts used to shuffle contributions through anonymous donor funnels. One of those accounts was flagged in the original complaint against me, the one they tried to pin on me. But now the pattern was reversing. The more they dug, the clearer it became. Mitchell and Elena had been laundering donations under the guise of strategic consulting services. A former intern leaked a payment schedule that aligned perfectly with every major donor event Elena held over the past 4 years. Her firm had taken management fees on top of campaign costs, all routed into a hidden partnership account in the Caymans. On Friday, federal agents raided Elena's campaign headquarters. Not dramatic, no handcuffs, no press conference. Just quiet men in dark suits walking out with boxes of hard drives, laptops, and folders labeled Event Debrief Private. Elena didn't answer her phone that day. Neither did her father. By Monday, Judge Raymond Whitlock resigned from the Judicial Ethics Committee he chaired. No press release. Just a one-line letter of withdrawal submitted to the court. The story broke 2 hours later, tying him to suspicious donations made during the 2009 Ridgway case. Local news ran a timeline of his rulings, and suddenly everyone remembered just how many high-profile cases he'd pushed through without scrutiny. Donors started pulling out from Elena's latest fundraising project. One by one, names disappeared from her event rosters. A software CEO publicly distanced himself from her PAC. A city councilwoman tweeted that transparency starts at home. I watched it all unfold from the safety of distance. No press interviews. No smug grins. Just silence. I picked up the girls from school that Friday. Lila asked why Mommy had been crying on TV. I told her it was about grown-up stuff, but everything would be okay. Naomi asked if we could get burgers. I said yes. That night, we played board games in the living room while cable news rolled headlines in the background. I didn't smile. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. This wasn't revenge. It was balance. They tried to bury me under their corruption, but they didn't know I kept receipts. The mediator's office was neutral territory, gray carpet, dull artwork, water in glass pitchers, and the kind of forced calm that makes your skin itch. Elena walked in 10 minutes late, sunglasses on, no makeup. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, Elena had always been slim and sharp, but like the shine had been sanded off her. Like someone who used to speak in headlines and now whispered in footnotes. She didn't say a word when she sat down, just nodded to the mediator and crossed her legs like we were discussing something routine. The mediator, a soft-spoken woman named Claire, started walking us through asset divisions and custody. But it was all just formality now. The headlines, the raids, the collapsing donor tree. Elena didn't have the leverage anymore. Ivan is requesting full custody of Naomi and Lila, Claire said. Elena didn't flinch. Fine. And he's retaining all properties and investment accounts. Fine, she said again, her voice clipped, flat. Claire hesitated. You understand the terms are final? I said it's fine. I didn't look at her until Claire stepped out to grab some additional paperwork. When the door shut behind her, I finally spoke. I want you to say it. Elena didn't move. Say what? That you were going to frame me. That this was never about the girls. That you wanted me out of the way. She turned toward me, and for a second, I saw her old fire flicker back. You want a confession? She asked. Fine. Yes. I was going to frame you. Yes, I wanted you out of the way. Because you were always going to be in the way. Always slowing things down. Always so careful. So moral. I let the silence hang. You were useful once, she added. But I outgrew you. I nodded slowly. And now? Her lip curled. Now I get to see how long you last without me dragging you into relevance. That made me laugh. A quiet, bitter sound that came from deep in my chest. You think I'm the one who needed saving? I leaned forward. You didn't just lose a marriage. You lost everything trying to prove you mattered more than the truth. She signed the last form with a heavy stroke, like it hurt. As she reached for her bag, I pulled out a folder from my briefcase. Plain manila, unmarked. I slid it across the table. What's this? She asked. Open it when you get home. Ivan. Trust me. She stared at it like it might explode, then tucked it under her arm and left without another word. Later that night, I got the text. Elena, you bastard. Inside the folder were time-stamped photos of Mitchell boarding a flight to Rio with a woman named Marissa Chin, one of Elena's former assistants. The account they'd been hiding their funds in? Drained. Every last cent gone 2 days before the raid. He'd left her. Clean, quiet, and very, very rich. Elena, meanwhile, was broke, disgraced, and alone. I didn't respond to the text. What was there to say? She had tried to ruin me, to erase me from my own family, my career, my life. And in the end, the only person she outmaneuvered was herself. 3 months later, I was standing barefoot in the backyard, sipping coffee and watching Naomi and Lila chase each other around the soccer net we'd set up on the grass. The air was crisp. October in Chicago always feels like the city's apology for summer's chaos. The trees lining the fence were turning orange, red, gold. I'd almost forgotten how peaceful silence could be. Our new house wasn't as flashy as the penthouse. No marble countertops, no floor-to-ceiling windows. But it had a yard, a real kitchen, and rooms that echoed with laughter instead of tension. It felt like a home again. I still worked. God knows I couldn't sit still for long, but it wasn't for politicians anymore. I'd started a new firm. Smaller, discreet. My clients weren't Fortune 500s or powerful families. They were whistleblowers. Victims. People who, like me, had been targeted by systems too powerful to fight alone. My first case had come from a teacher in Philadelphia who uncovered grade fraud tied to campaign donors. The next, a nurse exposing a pharma PAC's kickback scheme. One by one, people started finding me, sometimes through quiet referrals, sometimes from the articles that still circled Elena's name and shame. I never advertised. I didn't need to. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A new inquiry. Client request. I think my fiancé is planning to ruin me. He's already hacked my laptop. I just don't have proof. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. I looked up again. Naomi had just scored a goal, arms flung in the air like she'd won the World Cup. Lila was laughing, chasing her around, shrieking something about a rematch. They were okay. I was okay. I tapped the message open and started typing. Let's talk. First thing I'll need is access to your device logs. The truth is, I'll never be the man I was before Elena. That version of me, the one who trusted, who didn't check the locks twice, who believed love and ambition could coexist without cost, he's gone. But the man who took his place? He doesn't break. He watches. He waits. And when the corrupt try to devour the innocent, he makes sure they choke on every lie they ever told.